in McDonaldland news. Mount McDonaldland is experiencing thick volcanic shake activity. So try the new Mount McDonaldland shake when you order the McDonaldland meal with your very own character souvenir kit. McDonald's, McDonaldland, get the McDonaldland meal in McDonaldland. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I'll be monitoring. I'll have them monitor in the back, but they already know to not turn them off at any point. If they needed to not pick them up, they could just move it down. But that often we have our own internal battle with people turning the microphones off when they're done talking. Almost every time I'll grab it to go talk, and then Tom will just turn it off. And don't turn it off. Oops. So cool. If you're good, you're the next person to talk into it. So
I'm so sorry. I had a name tag on, but it immediately fell off of this, and got stuck to my sheet. Oh. Not to stay on, so I can stay on. All right, I'm gonna put this over there, and then we're gonna filter people in. If that
sounds good.
Is that okay?
Yeah. 3 inches away is going to be your best bet. That's how we're going to get the best sound quality. For the live stream specifically, try and hold the mics as horizontal as possible. We're going to get higher sound quality. It's not going to be anything super noticeable here, but like don't hold it down like this. It just doesn't work out well. We have 2 microphones that will be going at once, so we have to cross them in a way that's going to be crazy because we don't have feedback. Yes. Cool. Yeah, if for some reason you still have the microphone, but you need to not be heard for a second, you can just hit it. They are directional microphones. So unless it is directly in front of your face. What? You're supposed to be. That is all that I have. Perfect. Thank you guys. Perfect. And then, Madam Moderator, if I could just have you flip yours on. Perfect. Thank you very much.
No, she isn't.
Let me know for sure if I got it on. I'm pretty sure I did.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. You should be in this seat. Yes, I know. So I better be careful.
I feel like this is critical information. There. So with Jessica being in the new role, there was so many new ones.
And it's free dyes and perfumes. For an effective clean that's gentle on skin, wash your laundry with all three clear.
When too much work bogs you down, Asana helps you handle it. AI makes it easy to hand off routine tasks and stay focused on
Oh my God, it's so good to see you. It's been ages. Oh, sorry. We'll talk about it. It's been ages. So sorry. It's been ages. It's so good to see you. How have you been?
Ready, guys?
Hello, everyone. Hi, good evening. Thank you all so much for coming and welcome to our panel event of Writing the Future of Themed Entertainment. My name is Melody Matheny. I'm the founder of Slice Creative Network. If you're not familiar with Slice or vaguely familiar with Slice, it's an online network of creative freelancers who support the themed entertainment industry. We're very proud to bring this event to you tonight. I would like to thank our sponsors. They are Guernsey Tingle Architects, Paragon Fabrication, Practical Imagination, Innovated Studios, Disney Live Entertainment, and AOA. And a special thanks to AOA, which we are in their studio tonight, broadcasting live. Thank you, guys. And I would like to also say that AOA has always been so supportive of Slice since the very beginning. We started 15 years ago, and that was right around the time AOA started as well. And we've always had a great partnership, so thank you very much. Yes. So the event info, tonight, this event has been a passion project for myself and several of our members, including my two fellow producers, Emma Oliver and Sophie Katz, if you can have a wave. Yes, we've been trying to produce this event for probably more than a couple of years. It's been in our minds and thoughts, and we've been trying to figure out what the best way to present this information is. So it's a long time coming, and we're very, very happy. And I would like to thank all of our incredible panelists tonight for volunteering their time and knowledge for our benefits. So let's give them a round of applause. We'll be introducing them in just a moment. Our MC for the night is Miss Colette Picot. She is a Slice board member for this entire time that Slice has been in existence. And she's a veteran show writer. She started as a performer, and 30 years ago, she became a show writer. She's worked on projects like Epic Universe, Volcano Bay, and Nintendo World, the first one, and which extended into all of them. So that's very impressive. And she has no intention of stopping, which is awesome. She's a powerhouse. So please, let's give a big round of applause to Colette Picot.
Thank you, Melody. So we are here today to talk about the vital role that writers play in bringing projects to life. And before we introduce the panelists, I thought it would be really fun to give them a chance to learn something about all of you. So I would like to see a show of hands if you happen to work with writers. Okay, that's great. All right. Now, does anybody here hire writers? Raise your hand. Taking notes. Yes. And let's see how many people here who are actually writers. Come on, Stacy, raise your hand. Oh, I thought All right, how about if you've ever wished that you had a writer on a project? That's good to see. All right, now do you use a writer in the blue sky or initial phases of a project, like right at the very beginning? Raise your hands. Okay. What about the schematic design phase? Raise your hands for that. See a show of hands for that. We're seeing fewer and fewer. All right, the design development phase. Raise your hands. How about the production and installation phases? Yeah, that's what I figured. We're not seeing very many people raising their hands for that, and that should not necessarily be the case. Which is exactly why we're here tonight, to shine a light on one of the most powerful and sometimes invisible creative forces in this industry. Sometimes the most okay, I gotta say that again because it's really important. We're here to shine a light on one of the most powerful and sometimes invisible creative forces in this industry, the writers. Because in this weird and kind of wonderful world that we work in, writers do so much more than just craft clever taglines and script dialogue. Isn't that right? Yeah, it can be anything from dreaming up the initial concept to writing design narratives that paint a vivid mental picture of the guest experience from the moment they arrive to the time they leave. Writers can also help shape the emotional arc of the guest journey, defining the tone, building the stakes, and taking every little detail of the story and turning it into a repeatable and truly memorable experience. And it isn't just theme parks. The writer's work spans aquariums, zoos, cruise ships, immersive entertainment, media, video games, architecture, hospitality, brand experience centers, and I'm sure I've left out a few. Can anybody think of one? Just call it out. Museums, that's right. Anybody else? I said that one, but that's okay. Hospitals.
HR training.
Oh, there we go. We write scripts for attractions, live shows, and media. We develop operational manuals, RFPs, presentations, exhibit copy, signage, and marketing materials. Basically, if it involves words, writers write it. Writers also help teams discover the why, bringing voice and clarity of purpose to every phase of development. And we help guests connect with the story, the place, and their role in it. Now, I want you all to think back to a moment when an attraction, a show, or an exhibit made you gasp, laugh out loud, or even shed a tear. Behind that special moment was a writer, quietly crafting the wonder, the drama, the heart, and the surprise. Great storytelling really just takes a collection of cool ideas and brilliant designs and weaves them into something remarkable. When writers are brought in early and often, that's when the collaborative magic happens. Everything becomes clearer, bolder, and more deeply human. So today, we're going to dive into how writers bring experiences to life and why including them from the very beginning isn't just a good idea. It's key to creating cohesive experiences that stick with guests long after they've gone home. So now it's finally time to meet our panelists. So please introduce yourselves, starting down at this end, and tell us just a little bit about your experience in the industry.
Hello. Lindsay, I'm doing it right. My name is Amina Kaplan. I'm currently a show director for Disney Live Entertainment. I'm really excited to be here. I spent most of my career doing both performance and directing all alongside each other, but now I'm a full-time director, and that's all that I do.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Theron Skis. I've been based in Orlando for 30-something years. Spent the majority of my career here with Disney. Did spend some time with Universal. Still have the scars. Just kidding. Now I run a company called the Designers Creative Studio and get a chance to work all over the world. And I know I've met a lot of you, so really great to see you again. And thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Scott Swenson. I'm the owner and CEO of Scott Swenson Creative Development. For about 21 years, I was the director of entertainment at Busch Gardens in Tampa, and created a little event that, you know, over here in Orlando, they try to avoid, and that's called Howl-O-Scream. I was the creative force behind that for 15 years, and then Over the last 11 years, I've had the opportunity to write, direct, and produce shows for all of the things that you have mentioned, including zoos and aquariums and museums and all over the world. So I've basically turned my ADHD into a business model.
I'm Stacy Barton, and I am called many things. Writer, story strategist, narrative designer, script doctor, script writer. There's probably a few more. Right now, I am the senior show writer on Walt Disney Imagineering's live entertainment team, the global and advanced development team. It's way too long to say that all together. I tried to break it up. But most of my career, including now, I've been a freelancer, so I work all over. Even though I am on that team at Disney, I'm a what's called casual temporary, so which means I get no benefits, but I can work for other people, so it's fabulous. So I worked all over the world for about 25 years as a writer, and I've been in themed entertainment, live experiences, immersive experiences since 1984.
I'm Tim Anderson. I'm a principal concept designer here at AOA, actually. I've been here for about 3 years. I was at Universal for almost 7 years before that. And I've freelanced in and out of this industry in video games. Most of my time as a designer, I've been in the kind of blue sky early development. While not a credited full-time writer, I've had the opportunity to lend, a lot of writing to the early phases of things before they really get kicked off. And yeah, that's it.
My name is Francisco Javier Nunez. Everybody calls me Frank, and I am the CIO of Franken Design. That stands for Chief Inspiration Officer. I hope to live up to that. I am the non-writer in the panel. And my job and our team's job is to uphold the ideas and the vision and the storytelling through physical aspects of a project that these wonderful people in this room come up with. How does that transition over? How does that IP uphold itself throughout the design phase? So most of us at Franken Design come from an architectural background. We're the geeks that just draw things, but it seems very, very menial and detail. We're usually in schematic design and DD, but there's a huge importance in making sure that the IP, the story, the vision, that lamp has to be there before you bastardize a story and throw somebody out of the magic. It's a lot of buildings, but nobody goes to a theme park to see the facilities. They go to see the show. And that show is written by wonderful people like these that we have to uphold in our design. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So since we were talking about storytelling, why don't we start with that? Let's start with Theron. How important is storytelling in the development of your projects?
It's the first step. So storytelling is critical. We design experiences for human beings. So most of you don't realize this maybe, but you have to be a sociologist, an anthropologist, psychologist way before you're a designer. And writers get that. Writers understand the connection to human beings. We don't just create attractions or shows, we create emotional connections with the audience. Because in our industry, if we don't do that, they don't come back. And if they don't come back, that $300 million you spent doesn't get paid back, and our clients usually don't like that. So starting everything with the story is key. It's not just the starting point, it becomes the North Star. And it's something that you have as a thread through your whole project. I don't want to take over, but just storytelling isn't the beginning, it is the core of the project, because it identifies your audience, it takes the brand of the client that you're working with, it distills that brand into an emotionally connecting experience. And then as a creative director for the majority of my career, it helps you when you have things like value engineering. Because if you've never really established a story and you're at DD or CD and they come to you like they have on many projects and we're X million over budget, we have to mitigate these costs, which to the creative person sounds a lot like cutting. So if you don't have a story, you don't know how to adjust that and what things to take out.
Does anybody else on the panel have something that they'd like to say about that, about storytelling and the importance of it?
So I like to think of, I've used this analogy in several sessions that I've taught and several panels that I've been on. The story is like the Christmas tree. It's not the ornaments. It's the tree itself. It's what provides the shape. It's what provides the support. It's what provides the thing that guests are going to say. They're not going to walk in and go, gosh, look at all those beautiful ornaments. They're going to walk in and go, that's a great tree. So you have to have that great story, and it kind of builds off of what you were saying, so that when the time comes where you have to make tough choices, you have a litmus test. Does this contribute to the story? And if we take it away, is the story lost? So it is where we start, it is where we continue throughout, and it is where we finish. Our job in the entertainment industry or the attractions industry is to tell stories. The shortest distance between two people is a great story. So if we have the ability to create that and create that foundation, to create that Christmas tree, so we have a beautiful place to hang ornaments, otherwise we just have an ugly stick and a box. So you got to make sure that that story is crafted well, that story is sturdy enough to support all of the cool stuff that Frank's going to add to it later when he installs it, and that you know, if you're the creative director, or as I say, the guest experience advocate, you know how to make certain that that story continues to be told.
Anybody else? Stacy?
I just have something to add to that, in that I also think that while this story is absolutely the place where we begin, and the thing that we have to know, the dramaturgy has to be right, the arc has to be right, all of that. It's really important to know that in our industry, what we use this story to serve the experience that the audience has. So sometimes the story can get on our way. If the slice of story chosen for an attraction or a show is too large, the experience suffers. And at the end of the day, in themed entertainment, what we're offering them is the promise of the experience they're going to have with the story. So yes, story is everything. It's where it starts and ends and all of that. But we have to constantly be remembering it's not our story. If you want to tell your story, go write a play, go write a film, go write a book. In themed entertainment, it's about the audience and how they experience the story. So I think as we work together, one of the things that I often do is people think that I want to just care about the story, and I do, but it's what are the moments in the story that are going to grab the audience, that are going to make them feel a part and connected and belonging and all that other stuff. So it is all about storytelling, but it is for the purpose of the experience that the audience has in this particular venue. That's my opinion anyway.
The story is so key to all of this. Amina, do you have something that you'd like to share as well about that?
I mean, I could just co-sign everything that my colleagues here are saying.
Okay.
Yeah. In particular, I love what Stacy said, because we're working together right now on a project, and I am a absolute, just like these two guys. That's why I was kind of smiling, because we just love writers, and we understand that the writer, without the writer, there's absolutely nothing. But when you're working with Stacy, she's constantly giving back to you a little bit. She's never like wanting, just as you just said, I could not have said it better, but that the story becomes about us, or it's bigger than the thing that we're trying to create. We are constantly in service of the audience. In my opinion, we are public servants. And so that's what we're doing. The one thing that I would push back just a tiny bit, film, play, book, in my opinion, those are still for the audience. If you want to do it for yourself, write a diary.
That was great. How about you, Tim? Did you want to add to that?
I feel like a lot of my experience as a designer is kind of a little more on the receiving end of the story, and I know we'll probably delve into that a little bit more later. But without the story there, I'm just drawing pretty pictures, which can be fun, but also doesn't do anybody any good, and can get wildly out of control as far as the budget goes, and just aimless. It's aimless without some sort of story or placemaking that comes from the writers. So, yeah.
Hey, Frank? No? Okay. All right.
I'll just say that was bold for hearing a writer talking about how the too long of a story can impact it. We've been in that room where you're like, I think you already made the joke. I think it's already done. It served its purpose. And people hold on to that. So hearing it's very refreshing. And I see why she loves working with you, because you have that mindset. So
Kill your darlings.
Yeah, it's very true. It can't be too complicated. So it takes a lot of different disciplines to bring a creative vision to life. So in your experience, how do writers help align all the different stakeholders around that central vision? And it can be the development team, operations clients, or even IP holders. So who'd like to take a stab at that one? You've got the microphone. Frank, why don't you give it a try? No?
I was gonna shivering. I was.
Amina, go ahead.
You know, honestly, I actually think that writers should write freely and like with abandon and write to their imagination, write to, you know, whatever the theme is or whatever, and not be encumbered by some of those things. I truly think that's where the director partnership comes in. That's where we start to interpret that and lift it off the page and send it out to the design team with the writer. I think of them as being like right on my shoulder, and I'm constantly checking in. I'll just, you know, just back to what you were, the poll that you did earlier, and the less hands as we get into production surprised me. I wasn't doing the poll, but my hand would have been up the entire time, because the writer to me is, we're there on production day, we're there, right? And if that is able to happen, then I feel secure. But I feel like that's what a director does, is do all that management stuff with designers, and writers are to me sacred a little bit, in that they need that freedom to just to do it.
That's great. Anybody else have a point they'd like to make on that?
I'll just jump in
Yeah,
and
sure.
co-sign. I love that with
Yeah.
what you were saying. Just my experience with writers, there was, you know, it's a very cross-disciplined kind of field. And when you have the creative director all the way through to the design team or whatever, so it seems like your attention is divided in so many different areas. You're trying to give direction to the interior designers, you're giving direction to the architects or the engineers. And having a writer or two or three or multiple on a project, it gives you the people that can really carry that torch and stay really hyper focused on the purity of the story and how that gets translated. In the blue sky and even through concept phases, you have such an idealistic version of the story, and you can't possibly imagine that early how that story applies to every little detail. We're picking benches for the causeway, and you're, you know, in the last stage of design. Oh gosh, I didn't know. Let's think about this. So having that writer or that writing team available to really carry that torch of the story, of the cohesion of that story throughout, that was really helpful for me on all of my projects.
Okay. Well, let's focus for a moment on the collaboration between writers and designers. Once a writer writes a narrative for a themed experience, then how does the designer use the writer's work, the narrative, to inform their work and maybe even improve it? What do you think about that?
So as a designer, that's where the foundation comes from, the story, and I'll often have the opportunity to add to it, embellish, or come up with other ideas. But without that foundation, like I said before, it's just kind of aimless wandering. To constantly have that, some refer to as a North Star, or, you know, that having that document in whatever form it is be the guiding principle. I feel like so much of themed entertainment is placemaking, can be narrative or really just placemaking, but that has to be rooted in something. And for me, it's what the writers do. And as an artist, if I need to make a decision about scale or lighting or color temperature or whatever, it has to serve that story. And that's when I'm in doubt, I just look, what does the story ask for in this case? How can I make it better? How can I avoid doing too much? Because that, I think, can be a personal tendency, just keep adding to it. But, you know, get back to that root of what is the story.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just following up with that, it becomes your North Star, but to me, it's more like the GPS. It's the voice that says, if you're veering off, go check the story. Does this really add to the story? Is it part of the narrative? Are you augmenting what you're telling? The beauty about stories is that everyone has their own imagination. So when you close your eyes, for those of us that got to listen to radio and hear like a novella or a story in the radio, you came up with that entire story in your mind. And there was a big responsibility for somebody to take that either from a book to a film or from a film to an actual attraction. There's a lot of responsibility involved with that. So you're trying to also be responsible that the collective vision that you're coming up with has some kind of relevance with the audience that you're presenting it to, be it in China or Asia or Saudi. How would they have interpreted this vision as well? So, but just like you said, the North Star, I think it's a great voice, but it's more like the GPS, so that when there's a fork in the road, the deciding factor being the story, the narrative, and how does it add to it?
That's a great analogy. Stacey, you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the things I love about the collaborative nature of our work is that if I have an imagination in my head of what the thing is, and let's say there's a window and it's a huge part of it, and they come back, the designers come back and say, we can't build a window there because there's a post that has to hold up the roof or whatever. One of the things that I feel like I can do, and I think other writers can do, is then change the dynamics of that so that now it's a door, and then we recraft the story so that everyone thinks it was always gonna be a door. And so I think that saves time and money and effort and energy, that kind of collaboration, or just the ability for a technician to say, I hear what you're wanting to do is create this emotion through this lighting thing. Well, there's this new thing that does this other thing. What would you feel about that? And I think that's great.
Scott?
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on, is with designers always know the newest toys. They always know the newest crayons that we can color with. And as writers, it's essential that we continue to stay in contact with those designers, with those experts who say, you want to do, you want to do a mirror ball. Well, that's, very 1970s, Scott. That's lovely. But now we can do that with laser. Let's do that. So it's important to recognize that there's an expertise outside of the writing that can be that echo back, that reinforcement of, or that justification for change, because there's new tools that we can play with. The other thing is, as a writer, and I think everybody up here will probably have a story about like this one, when you work with certain designers, I worked with a designer back when I was at Busch Gardens and writing a lot of Halloween stuff. And I would write these Halloween venue flows, which is my version of a script for a haunted attraction. And I use it for immersive stuff as well. My favorite thing was to send it off to this one designer who was our art director, and he would come back and he would draw things that I didn't write in the narrative, but saw in my head. When you find those designers, don't let them go, because they are in your brain, and you have that shorthand, that psychic shorthand that you can share with them. So I think it's really important that, writers are very much connected to the designer, not only for inspiration based on the technology that is continuing to evolve, but also those people who can get in your head and understand the story you're trying to tell between the words that you actually write.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just make a quick point about
Sure.
story. You probably will go there, but I think what's important now is to realize that story in our industry isn't necessarily somebody sitting back going, what would be a great yarn for me to spin? There's a lot of information that's gathered before the story is ever written, because the story has to embody all of those elements. If you write a story, for example, I'll just give a stupid example to illustrate. You could write a fantastic narrative, a great story, great characters and action, but if it actually is opposite of what the client needs, you've just wasted all that time. Or if you take that down the road too far, you could see how bad that's going to be. So the story itself has to not just embody the brand, the commercial aspirations, and the audience of the client, but it also has to have enough information to inform everybody on the team, right? So when you go to talk to the designers, that information will already be really intelligently and in such a great way encoded within the story already. And even the real technical fields, believe it or not, lighting, engineering, that information for a great writer is already encoded in the story. So it makes that communication possible.
Yeah, I agree. Amina, did you have anything to say about that?
Really
absolutely.
thought that was absolutely the case. And I'm thinking about that partnership between director, designer, writer, and how the play is the thing and how
Mhm.
it really is our Bible, really. And we go back to it and we appreciate writers like Stacy and, everybody, Scott, I'm sure as well, who will change for whatever is needed. But I am such a purist when it comes to the writer and the writer's work and the writer's word. I start there and then I mine it for all kinds of awesome, but I won't deviate from that encoding that's been put on. I really have a strong trust for writers and what their intentions are.
I wish everybody was like you. That's awesome. Yes.
Who are
Nope.
y'all
So,
working
do you
with?
mind if I just add? I just want to point out that I'm a visual designer because I don't word good. And everything that they said is basically what I had in my mind and wanted to say. And so I appreciate you for being writers and actually being able to explain in words, articulate what it is that I was trying to say. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah, word good. Yeah, that's good. So, we were speaking, Stacy, you were talking about costs. And can writers help prevent costly changes down the line? And if so, how?
Well, I'll just say that I've come into a lot of projects that didn't think they needed a writer early on. And I'm pretty sure they went through a stream of creative directors and, development processes because they didn't have a solid story that made sense, that agreed with the client's directives, that agreed with the audience, marketing, and all of that. One of the things that I do a lot of time, I don't know if you guys, the other writers do, I'm sure, but is I listen to everyone. If I can, I want every stakeholder in the room, if at all possible, at some point, so that you can hear from the horse's mouth what the person wants, what are your problems, what are you up against, what are you worried about, all that kind of stuff. So that I digress. So that you can know, you can start to craft that early on. And when that isn't done, that isn't used with the writer, then I just see lots of times where they've been spinning their wheels and spending. That's a lot of money. Time is money. Bringing in new people to run things is money. And I found that more than, I can't always say ones that I've kept them from spending too much money, but I've certainly brought in and saved some butts.
It's a craft and it's a skill. And I think, like, maybe Dominique can back me up on this, but I don't think Disney Live Entertainment had a full-time staff writer up until about 10 years ago, and the company's 70 years old. And that ought to show, like, kind of how that
I was the first one.
Yeah, and there you have it. And that's what I mean about that purity. It starts with that writer and that story because it's an anchor. It's your encoding. It's where you go from there. Otherwise, you can spin your wheels a little bit as a director and as a designer, because there's a whole bunch of us. But there's usually one writer. There are teams of writers for sure, but we're coming back to that source. And I feel so much stronger when I have the writer in the room and that person is not me. I would prefer to have a writer beside me, honestly, as a teammate who's got a separate brain that you can bounce off of. I've worked with all these amazing writers in this front row right here, and it's great. They all have great brains that you can bounce off of. And then I kind of feel like a knight or like a shepherd, and I got it, and I'm going in, and then I go in and and then I turn. Did I do that okay? Okay, and then you go back like that. So it's a real symbiotic relationship for me, but it's essential to have a writer.
Just to circle back to the cost savings, because I think that's something that. So I have a unique perspective in my career. I've hired people like me when I sat on the other side of the desk, and now I am people like me. So I recognize the practical side of it too. There are producers, there are board members who will sit back and say, "Yeah, that's a great story. Can you do it for half the price?" And I will tell my clients, I never want money to be the reason you don't tell a good story. Good stories do not need money. When it comes to the Halloween industry, which again, I go back to those references because I've done so much of it. Give me a candle, 3 good actors, and a great story, and I'll scare the crap out of you. Okay, so, and I also believe that it's the writer's job, and sometimes in most cases, passion, that if all of a sudden it comes back and we can't get the window, or we can't have the live tornado in the middle of the room, or we can't do this, or we can't do that, it's the writer's job to find the alternative that doesn't impact the story in a negative way. I always tell my clients, please be straightforward with me. Say, I don't like it, I can't afford it, we tried it, I hated it. The chairman of the board thinks it's a stupid idea, because I've got like 10 ideas lined up right behind it. That's what writers do. You know, when you say write with abandon, I dream with abandon. What I put on paper is just the tip of the iceberg. And I know every writer works a little bit differently, but I'm always encouraging, tell me, you know, you can't afford it? Great. Can we do this instead? Can we do this instead? So I think that the writer, because this, God, I'm old, this costs a lot less than this, you know, building stuff. Make your mistakes in the writing process. Make your changes in the writing process. That's why it's so essential to have a writer there at the very beginning and all the way up through production, because there's going to be something production week where all of a sudden, oh, we measured that beam wrong. We can't hang that there. And it shouldn't be the director's job to fix that. It's the writer's job to fix that, working with the team, of course. But the writer will automatically have, well, okay, I thought about this. Maybe we could do that instead. Happy accidents.
Well, since you touched on that, what difference does it make when you bring the writer in early as opposed to later on in the process?
I truly feel like you should not start the process without a writer. Like, I truly feel that way. Like, I literally think that's why we were chatting before we started the panel, and we were, you know, I'd say the thing that I always say, which is that if you're a director, you are necessarily a little bit of a writer and a little bit of a producer, because you have to be. But notice that if I'm a director and I'm sitting there with nothing to do, I become a writer. So I must have a writer, like legit. I just won't do it without it. And just very quickly before I pass it back, I'll share an anecdote just based on Scott. You just made me think of something about the way in which writers in the moment, in the process, help bring a thing to its natural conclusion or state of being. So I was an actor years ago, and I was on a TV show, and my very first day on the TV show, they had the head writer, her name was Allison, writing for me. And I would do one take, and then they would stop for like 10 minutes. I didn't know what was going on. Then I'd get a new page. And then the new page would just be a little bit closer to my voice as the writer got to know me. And then we'd do it again. We'd crack the jokes, 10 minutes. Allison would write, and she'd give me a new page. And I was just like, that was so freaking great. I mean, I already loved writers, but that just made me feel so good as in that state when I was an actor on a set. And that to me was just an example, an anecdotal example of what you all are talking about how the writer can come in and absolutely save an actor's job, save an actor's career. And yeah, we don't start without a writer.
I agree. Go ahead, Stacey.
Are we still on the money question, or do we move?
We moved on. Well, you can talk about whatever you want to.
I was just thinking about a project that required 2 different kinds of stakeholders. One of them was a sort of a museum type person, and the other was a very entertainment-y person, and the project was going to be in Vegas. And so I spent a lot of time having to have a foot in each world, which were not necessarily compatible in what they desired. And that was very early in the process. And so that protected a lot of work. We had to get the museum person's buy-off early to be able to use the IP that we were working with. You know how NDA goes. I'm sorry, I can't say much more. But so that was an early process that I'm pretty sure saved them a good bit of money. And I think the difference, it is to be noted that writing on a project that is going to require something to be built, like a theme park or a land or an attraction, is a little bit different than writing for a live entertainment piece in terms of when the writer has to be brought in. But I just did a project where I was brought in fairly late, and I was confined by what was already built. And fortunately, I really sort of love that sort of nasty backed into a corner situation. It's a weird fetish of mine, but but in that situation, there was only so much that could be done, and we did a great job, and the product is beautiful. But by then, there was already a set, so you can't just imagine what could be, and a cast actually. So yeah, so bringing us in early is good.
On the design side, I've been on projects. I was on a big project, big park, big land. For the longest time, we didn't have a writer, and iteration is part of what I do. I get that. But when you're iterating without a goal or an objective or a framework, it's extremely frustrating. I think of there's an old movie. Yeah, an old movie called UHF, the Weird Al movie. I don't know how many have seen it. Yeah. There's this gag running throughout the movie. There's a blind guy on a bench trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. And he'll turn it, and then he holds it up to his friend. And he goes, "Is this it?" And his friend goes, "Nope." And it happens like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie. And it's just, they never address it. It's just, and that's exactly what I think of working on a project without a writer, because there's somebody above who's making a decision, but no one between me as the designer and that person to give it any kind of form. And so do a piece. Is this it? Nope. And then you go back and you do it again. And it's frustrating. And to your point that you brought earlier, not only is it frustrating for the people who are doing that pointless iteration, it's costly. Like spending months doing that and nothing to show for it. My checks are still clearing, so I'm okay. But on the project side, they're just blowing through money without having anybody giving it that framework.
I'm going to remember that because it happens to writers too. Is this it?
Yeah. And like you said, as diminishing returns, as you're burning through the project, the success rate of the project is less and less. And it has to be from the beginning because you're cooking without a recipe. So you're just throwing stuff together. Is this it? I love that. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, I love that one too. So I'm lucky enough right now. I have 2 clients that I'm working for. And again, NDAs being what they are. I can tell you one is a science center and one is a zoo. And I'm doing a live show for one, and I'm doing 2 seasonal activations for another. And they have actually brought me in as a writer prior to budgeting. Yeah, they brought me in and said, in fact, next week, I am doing a presentation for one of the clients to their board to say, here's what we're going to do over the next 3 years. And they can say yay or nay, or they can say, yes, we will get behind this. They are using the writer's mindset, the creative's mindset, to help them establish their budget. Now, that is rare. It's happened in my 11 years of being independent. With these 2 clients, it's something brand new. But if you have that opportunity and you are able to convince them that, this is going to save you money, you're not going to have to go back and try this again if you know the story or the idea that you're going to try to convey, the world you're going to try to build, so that you not only have the recipe before you start cooking, but you actually have the shopping list before you start cooking. And you know what you can afford and what you can't.
And the steps and the order and how many ounces and how many pieces, how long in the oven. My proposal will hit your inbox tonight. I don't even know what it is. I want to be a part of it because it is done right and in order. That's an easy recipe to cook.
So just imagine that you were meeting with a studio, a vendor, or an executive who's never worked with a writer before, or maybe they're kind of unsure about adding a writer to their team or RFP. What would you say to them?
Call Scott. Just kidding.
Who are you? Where did you come from? Like, give me a little bit of your background, because I've got writers. I know tons of great ones, but I don't know if I'm going to bring them into this situation without knowing who you are. Who are you? What are we doing here? Why do you have me here? Let me look at your budget. Let's go. That's what I would say to them.
That's great.
That's great. I think I would help the client to understand that what they're really after is success for their brand, right? They want to grow their brand. their equity of their brand, how people perceive them. They want people to come back over and over again. And you just kind of run through the commercial success that they want to have that's spread across all of those areas. And that's what you need to do in this industry. Oftentimes you can't just have, and everybody's been saying it, you don't just have the luxury of being a writer. You have to be able to speak engineer. You can speak lighting designer, right? You don't have to be an expert. It's the same when you're negotiating with a client at the very tippity top end. In the very, very beginning, you have to demonstrate to them why the way you structure your team is critical, and having a writer on that team is critical. You can, if you do your homework, you go in beforehand and you say, this is your brand. Here's how you're currently touching your audience. We will definitely need a writer to tell stories about your brand so that it touches your customers in an even deeper way. If they look at me very confused, I walk out. I just think it's important that we understand those things, right? If you have to be able to defend everything. If you're on a project and you've got 25 architects, sorry, Frank, you have to be able, and it's a, you know, I don't know, a project that doesn't really need 25 architects. You need to be able to defend all of the decisions of all of the members of your team. Of course, I'm speaking from a team leadership perspective. And I would say the same thing for writers. You have to be able to justify that to your client.
I actually have to do that regularly, not to people that haven't used them, but people who don't want to spend money for me because I'm expensive. But I'm fast. Well, yeah, I mean, some people think so, some people don't. But so some of the times I talk about and you kind of touched on it, but if you are building something that's going to have a 3-week run, have at it. Just do whatever you want. If you want something where people are going to come back for 10 or 20 years, then what you're looking for is something that's going to make an emotional impact on someone. So I talk about that. The other thing that and writers are the ones that are going to at least be the tip of the iceberg or the point of the spear on making sure that there's that emotional connection. And the other thing is that just went out of my head. Oh shoot. What? Oh, I remembered. So I will also explain what the role is outside of sort of what you might see in a script or in writing, and that when a writer can come in and create a narrative that's like fiction, that has rich language that describes everything. You have a roadmap for all the teams. I spend a lot of time doing massive events, like $1 million immersive events that happened once. And in that, we learned how to run the teams off of something that I could write quickly. So I would write it in a way that it wasn't like, this is going to be great or this is purple and pretty, but with emotional language like really good literary fiction would have. And then that way all the teams could run. And they would all come back with budgets and they would say, okay, we can't have a window. We have to, that we would all sit around the table. We would hear all that. Then a writer can rearrange that narrative so that they can go. So sometimes explaining that to a client helps them understand that it's for the entire team, not just, well, we're not going to have any words in this. There's no one's going to speak. Why do I need a writer? Well, that's so that your teams are all working on the same concept. All on the same idea.
You know, I was just thinking, a lot of projects are very simple, like you were just talking about, but there are other projects that involve world building. And how important is it to create a very rich story to build those worlds?
They don't exist without them. I mean, it's just it's. I think everybody at the panel, I think the reason we were all sort of dumbstruck is because to us, that's it. World building is storytelling. Branding is storytelling. So, you know, you have to make certain that it doesn't exist. It cannot exist without a good story. And that story does not have to have that traditional story arc to it even. It has, but you have to understand this is, I use the term story sphere a lot when I'm doing immersive stuff. It still has a North Pole and a South Pole. It still has a beginning and an end, but you got a bunch of different pathways to get there. And that's what I use for world building or immersive stuff. But it's still a story.
The only reason I brought that up is because from time to time I've run into it where the client didn't feel that that was really that important. So I wanted you to reinforce the idea that it is important.
It is very important, and I think it's a very easy connection for those of us who work in themed entertainment to kind of make that connection, right? You think of the Magic Kingdom, you think of Universal Studios, you got lands, you've got attractions, you have story umbrellas that cover over those things. Where it starts to bake your noodle, which you really should think about, is that LMVH, right? Louis Vuitton, right? That's a story. That's a world. That's a brand. And if you begin to take the vernacular that we use every day and start to apply it to other segments of the global economy, you begin to realize, hey, I can work anywhere, because understanding what Bugatti is, right, and how they represent their world is really, really important for your longevity as a writer in the world.
You dropped yours in there, Scott. Just wanted to add a little comment. You know, earlier, obviously, I'm joking with my comment, and then Theron comes in and says it in a very professional way. But I'm going to double down on it, and here's why. When we were all dumbstruck by that question, it's because we're all sitting here as professionals who understand that a writer is essential, that, you know, that we need that. And the reason why I have that sort of tact, if somebody in the room or the quote unquote client doesn't understand that, is very simple. Our business is completely bloated with just tons of people who are in it. And sometimes the creatives, we're not in charge. And a lot of times the reason why writers are devalued, or the actor is devalued, or the director is devalued, or the designers are devalued is because there's a devaluation of us across the board. And what I'm responding to emotionally and intellectually, and it feels like is the thread through this, is that we understand the value of the writer. We understand that that's the fundamental of what we're doing as storytellers, and that we should be the ones telling them, encouraging them, actually, you do want this, and here's why. And you should be listening to us, and here's why. And that's kind of what I meant about the director, or whoever that is, creative director, being a shepherd or a general, or that we will fight that battle. That's our job, is to put that vision in front of them and say, actually, it is this. And so there. Okay.
I want to just real quick do a practical takeaway. For those of you who are not writing for major theme parks, because I have to be honest, and those of you watching on the streaming will understand this too. We're living in a very unique bubble here in Central Florida. We've got every flippin' theme park known to human existence that is super key here. Where you have to explain when you need a writer is when you get into some of those other areas that we mentioned at the very beginning. A lot of my clients are zoos. They do not understand the concept of a writer for a dolphin show. They don't get it. The dolphins jump, you talk about them, and then you send them away. So what you have to do, or what I found works, I'm not saying it's the only way, but what I found works is if you are trying to deal with those people who just don't understand, it's not that they don't think they need a writer, they don't understand what a writer does. So the first thing you have to do is listen to them. Ask what they need. What are you trying to accomplish? Because I often tell my educational clients, every audience member is not going to walk out with a degree after they see this show. That's not your goal. Your goal is to, and I get them to say this, your goal is to make them care enough to learn more. That's what a writer does. So there are going to be those situations. You're absolutely right. In the world of theme park, if a Disney client or a Universal client came back and said, well, I'm not really sure we need a writer, then I'd run. But if a zoo or a museum or
overseas,
yes, they're still learning. They're still learning. They don't understand. So that becomes our job as writers to help explain to them what we can do for them. And the best way to do that I've found is to first listen to what they want and then tell them how you as a writer can help deliver that.
Just wrapping that up, I have a very, very close anecdote. And as the person non-writer in the group that's doing this, the production design, the details for fabricating, there is a project whose concept design was given to us. And I was curious in the room, if even like AOA, have you had to have an incognito writer or an undercover writer, like where you're now funding it because they don't have it, the project is going to suck, and the only way to fix it is to get a narrative and a story that you can sell it. If you think about the human experience, how do you ever tell that if it's not by story? Everything you've ever done, from a restaurant you ate at to a haircut you got, everything was a story, or nobody knows about it and it wasn't an experience. For it to be an experience, it has to be a story. So we've had to have projects where we saw it going off of a cliff. And we literally had to buckle down, either hire a writer or have some of our creative staff, like Jeremy and our team, come up with a narrative, a seeds of a story that then convinced them that this is necessary. And the project, which the budget for that particular one was like $30 million. With AOA, we were doing the hallways, you guys are doing the attractions. The hallway of all that experience was only alive because we had to strong arm the client into understanding something that they didn't need. We don't need this. And so the client you would have walked away from was this client. You would have totally walked away and said, you don't get it. But we're like, how do we make this survive? And how do we tell you something without telling you something? Here's a beautiful story. So now the stardust of creation occurred. And they're like, we want that. But for them, it's just like, oh, now the LED screens make sense. Oh, that's why we have these little things. Got it. And that was all because of story that it survived.
My mic pack dies, so I need to show this microphone now too. So I'd like you to open up to all of you. Do any of you have any questions for this wonderful panel? Go right ahead.
So there's lots of attractions, lots of shows out there. How do you know when the story is going to be successful? Because I mean, there's lots of shows and attractions that you see that aren't successful in story writing. Maybe that's because they didn't have a writer, who knows? But how do you know when it's going to be successful?
You don't always. That's the truth. I think being able to do a little bit of dissecting of the ones that have been successful, and there's some questions to ask as to why. Did it already have, if we're talking themed entertainment, did it already have a strong IP base? Was that IP base considered in the choice of whether that IP became a roller coaster or a dark ride or a, whatever? But you can look at the ones that have succeeded, and there's a battery of things that you can look at. And then when you understand those things, there's probably a better word, but it's not coming to me. When you understand those parameters, then you can try to build, and you can ask your question: is this the kind of thing that a family is going to go to? Is this the kind of thing a superhero person is going to go to? So for me, it's almost always the audience. Have you paid attention to who the audience is? Are they going to come to this? It's great that you want to spend money on that, but is that the right thing? And if it's an IP, is that the right IP for that application? Like, if you wanted to do a Coco IP, are you going to put, Alabre has in a dark ride? That seems brilliant to me. Or a parade seems brilliant, So I think understanding why an audience reacts to an IP in a certain presentation can go a long way to making a good judgment. And then there's all kinds of things that happen why things fail, like a million things.
I want to go back to something you said earlier. It's because writers are psychologists and sociologists and a bunch of other ologists that we're going to make the best possible choice based on our experience. But you're right. You never know. What I strongly recommend, if you have this luxury, is and I do a lot of live entertainment stuff. I've done some attraction, but mostly live. I hang out at the exit, and my mentality is really, really simple when it comes to editing something. Start, stop, continue. Based on what I'm hearing people say as they leave, start doing things that they think is missing, stop doing things they hate, and continue doing things that they continue to like, while still maintaining the story. It's not brain surgery. You know, if somebody says, gosh, if you hear 15 people as they leave go, you know, I really enjoyed that until that stupid thing happened in the middle. You know what it's time for? It's time to get rid of that stupid thing in the middle and figure out what the next solution is. Working with the director, working with the designers to figure out how to improve that. Because I realize this is more true in live entertainment than it is in attraction building. But you can constantly sand and shave and fix and tweak. And in my opinion, it's your responsibility to do so, to make sure the story is always getting better.
I wouldn't want the pressure of being the only person on the project to make that decision. So fortunately, almost at every level, you're surrounded by many other professionals. And that, to me, has always been really comforting, that you know that it's a collaborative effort. It could have been somebody's vision that started it, but you know that it won't look the same when it gets implemented, because every great person has had a chance to make it better. So I would just take your question of, I wouldn't want you to go into a project thinking this whole thing is on me, you know, and because that would be devastating. But you have so many other great collaborators and the client who are going to affect that in a way that at the end, it hopefully is better than when you started.
Yeah.
Just one thought on that. We cut something yesterday. Last night, like I went and saw it at the park, and we were doing a little test run on it, and I did not know until it was in the park, and I saw it, and I was like, it's not happening. And so at 7 p.m., we were on the phone texting, doing all the things so that it did not happen in the parks today. By the same token, we put something in earlier this summer that was an experiment. Everyone was like, is she crazy? And I was like, well, yeah, let's try it, you know. And sure enough, went out there and watched it. All eyes were on it. And just like these gentlemen are saying, I tweaked it all day long. Watching the audience, knowing that everyone was scrutinizing, I tweaked it all day long until we had it right.
This is sort of tangential to that, but do you think that there is a measurable impact that a writer can have on improving dwell time, repeat visitation, and guest engagement?
Yes.
Yeah, measurable impact.
Yes. In
Okay.
fact, at our company, they have metrics that we use to do that. And some of it is just in a simple comment card where you get literal feedback. They come to my desk. I don't know if they come to you guys as well, but they come, and oftentimes what the guest is talking about is the story and the engagement of the character. And then I know that that's a team effort between myself and the writer and the designers. But usually, in my opinion, it's a compliment directly to the storytelling that was done by the writer. But it's a literal, they write it down. Here's where we were. Here was the impact of that. And we enjoyed ourselves.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's amazing. Yeah.
Say, just to tag on to what she was saying, you get that with legacy brands, right? So Merlin, Universal, Disney, they have the dollars, the money, billions and billions of dollars that they're investing, and they don't see a dime back for 5 years. They're going to measure the living heck out of that thing. Chimelong Park, Knott's Berry, and I'm not throwing shade. Their investments are lower, and they don't necessarily, or may not necessarily, measure as frequently. And so you may not know, you know, when you go through.
And is that impact high, do you think? I mean, do you think it's important, and do you think it's high enough to give it value?
100%.
Okay.
100%. Just finished a project last year in Saudi Arabia for a gigantic mixed use area, and the very first space that they had done, which was quite a few acres, they hired me to help them build an evaluation program on that space. So to the best of knowledge, there's no other park or location in that part of the world that actually does that. So I was like, wow, that's amazing that you want to not just measure it and score it performance wise, but also how do the buildings survive, right? How is the lighting kept up? So I think it's really cool to see that filtering into the rest of the emerging markets that are really growing, because it's a best practice.
Go ahead. On that, I just wanted to say one of the measures that the value of the writer is going up, and I'm not kidding. It is literally this row of humans sitting right here. Like Disney just keeps adding writers because they're important and they're valuable. And so I think that's like an evidence right there.
That's great. We've got a lot of other questions here. This one right, okay, great.
Hi there. First, just thank you. I'm still early in career of 8 years, but just the existence of this panel, I almost quit being a writer for the entertainment because of feeling devalued. And so this is healing in many ways. But my excellent. But my question then is for my compatriots here who are earlier in their career. How do you advocate for yourself? I've had to defend my existence, oftentimes unsuccessfully, and that's a problem that still isn't solved. I know you guys, said like walk out, but when you have to defend the existence of not only your role or your department, what then?
Well, I was handed this microphone. Hi. Thank you very much. I like you. I struggled very early on in my career as a writer as well. It took me a long time to figure out that I was a writer. I had this general notion of I wanted to be a themed entertainment designer. I didn't draw. I did, but I didn't do it very well. And storytelling was always a passion. So for me, the earliest struggle was actually consolidating, figuring out, oh yeah, you're a word guy. You do that really well. You should do that and focus that as your path. But when it comes to starting out early, I think you just have you do have to speak the story. You have to speak the language of story to people, because story is a universal language. Story, when you boil it down to it, is a hierarchical understanding of what the world is that we're trying to create. It's the it. And when you get somebody to understand that, the story you're writing doesn't stop at words on the page, it's the foundation for everything that rises out of it, literally rises out of the earth in some cases, then at least to me, that's when people started resonating. It's like, okay, you're not, it's a verbal blueprint for what's eventually going, people are going to walk through. And that's just the beginning, of course. But I think when you talk to somebody who doesn't have an inherent or an inveterate understanding of what a writer is, you have to understand, being a psychologist again, why don't they understand who you are and what value you bring, and readjusting your pitch and your unique selling proposition to that particular person that you're trying to get to validate your value. That was my off-the-cuff answer.
Was I the only one hearing music behind him? Like, like there was a beat in the spoken word. Well said. Well said.
What's your name?
Jared.
What's your name? Oh, okay. Okay, and before we get to another one of your questions, I just want to ask a question that I thought of because of that one is, so how do you know if a writer is good and whether or not you should hire them to our panel? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sort of a physical theater kind of director, like where, I love words. I'm a total chatty person, but somehow when I start making work, I tend to move through the body. And so when I'm reading a script, it feels like I know right away if the writer is writing to like somebody like myself, and that that they've found a way to put the spine of the story in there. And it's so clear that even a movement person like me can get it. and understands and wants to pull the you know, the visuals off of the page. But I feel like I know within just a few pages, really, if the writer is, for me, not necessarily if they're good, because sometimes I'm not the right director for that writer's words and they're awesome. But, you know, but for me, it's, I feel like they understand the movement, the music of a story, and they're pulling a movement musical person like me straight into the heart of it like that.
It's a great answer. Can I just say, I'll just go back and say, as a writer and as all of us, I would tell a story. Everybody, no matter your discipline, you, at some point in your career, I think you may find yourself in a place where you're justifying your existence there. So first is to know your own value, number one, as a human, and then as whatever your skill is driving you to do. But then I would not just defend, but I would tell a story, because that's how our mind catalogs memories, right? Is in a story format. And that's how all of us communicate. That's how all culture is there. So I would highly recommend that you just do that. Just start telling a story. The other thing is networking. It kind of goes, how do you know if you're hiring a good writer? I mean, you can definitely sample their work. And what I like to do is ask around. You know, have you worked with this person? Do you know this person? Because that's the most important thing, is networking. You always want people defending you. And if you get to that place where you've got to have this person on your team, then you get to a point where you don't have to defend yourself anymore, and you can kind of enjoy that community that you build.
Just a real quick add on to that, the whole networking thing. I teach improv classes to the business students at University of South Florida, which sounds like a total disconnect. It's but I'll tell you, I've been doing it for 11 years now, and I have my students come back going, I got a job because of you. I was able to think on my feet. I was able to be present. And what I tell them every single class that I have, I tell them, when you go into a networking situation, don't go in to make contacts. Go in to make friends. Because you said it and it targeted it in me. Your friends are going to be the ones who defend you. The people who trust your work, the people who trust you, are going to be the ones not only who defend you, but are also going to be the ones who say, you know what? I know you asked me to do this thing for you, but I may not be the right person. But boy, do I have somebody who can help. I don't think there's a single person on this panel who hasn't been given a job by somebody that they've worked with, somebody that they've networked with, someone that trusts them. And also listen. That's the most important. Listen to why you're being undervalued. It may be something as simple as they don't understand what you do. So sometimes we have to educate as well. And I say that because, again, going into the educational side, the museum side, they don't get live theater. They don't get attractions. They want to put up walls and pretty pictures and rush people through and charge them money. So, yeah.
I was just going to make a comment on how do you know if a writer is good? And I think that there are so many places a writer is used in this industry and in others that it's more finding a good fit. Like, are you a good fit? Like it might be about 10 years ago, I just said, I don't do the Marvel and the Star Wars. There are people that would bleed to do that. And I would have to sit and watch hours of films. So it doesn't necessarily mean if a writer is good or bad. What is the need? What is the IP? What is the tone? I mean, I have one of those, Swiss Army knife personalities, but even I don't do everything, So I think if a writer can, I think listening is huge. If a writer can listen, if they can produce work on time or ahead of time, I always say do it better and faster than they expected and leave them wanting more is the secret, right? Anyway, so I think, but I do think that if a writer can't adapt and adjust to notes, if a writer can't take notes, that kind of goes without saying that they're a servant of the project. The project is not serving the writer. And that's what I meant. Oh, Amina's gone. That's what I meant earlier when I said about the difference between a film or a book. I've done those too. And those you had a little bit more room to say, no, this is my vision. This is what I want to say. And then people can help you craft that. When you're in this role, it's not your vision. It's someone else's vision, someone else's pocketbook. And so a good writer is going to be able to listen and come alongside, adapt, change, be flexible, offer another idea, hear what's happening, read the room, that kind of thing. And I think, especially in themed entertainment, we're always, at least in the model that Disney uses, that many others have followed, writers are just underneath the directors. We're still usually serving their vision. They see the whole picture, and so we're serving that. So my goal is always to make them look tremendous. You don't need to toot your own horn. You need to toot theirs, and when you toot theirs, they'll call you again, and then you get to work again. And then maybe somewhere 10, 20, 30 years later, they'll start tooting your horn. No, I'm kidding.
That was a great answer. No? Okay. Let's have some more. All right. Okay, great. Fantastic.
I have a mic, so I'll talk. I actually have more of a maybe a story to tell rather than a question, but we've been talking about it so much tonight that I feel like it's important to mention to keep spirits up. I recall a time, and this was back in around 01, a long time ago. I may have a little bit of my facts incorrect, but I know, Alex, I'm hoping you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I encourage it. All the writers at Disney were laid off. Imagineering were laid off. Mark Rhodes was the last one. He was laid off at somewhere around 19 and a half years of employment, so just shy of retirement. And I was dumbfounded because how can a storytelling company get rid of all the writers? However, there wasn't a lot of design going on at that time for those who remember their history. 2001. But that has changed now, right? So it does come back around. Thankfully, the company has remembered its roots and things have changed back. But I just wanted to tell that story just for those of you who are in the room who are writers. I am not. People do come to their senses, right? And so keep working together with all of us who believe in starting with a story that is important and we can get there. And when I left in 2001, I went to work for myself as a landscape architect doing residential design for a minute. And first thing I would say to my homeowners was, what's the story you would like to tell here? And they would look at me like I had 3 heads.
Can we get the microphone over here? Oh, Molly, go ahead, Molly. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Molly.
I can be.
Go ahead, Molly.
I don't need a microphone if you know me. So, thanks, Jared. A lot of questions and comments around theme parks, and attractions and live shows. So, from a writing perspective, where do you start when you don't have back in the day, there wasn't the given IP of now we're going to create something around something that's already been done, right? So, if you're talking about hospitality or sports or Disney Springs, where the hell did that come from? Where do you start when I would think from a creative standpoint, having that seed of your own and giving that idea, what's the difference between having that and not having that?
That's why I go back to the audience. What do you want the audience to do? What's the call to action for them? That can sometimes really help inform. You're talking about how to determine a story that's not an IP? Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't been paid to do many of those.
I've actually now done a lot of that. And COVID was helpful in that sense, because when you get furloughed for 7 months and you feel like a caged animal, you don't have anything to do but think about what other value you could possibly bring to the world other than just attractions. And turns out that story is key, right? Anybody a Don Miller fan, right? The story doesn't work unless it drives experience. I think you said that. And that is so true. So I've had the really cool opportunity of working with a Polish online shopping network. And what we focused on was radical intimacy with their shoppers. How do we build that relationship? Worked with a Japanese pharmaceutical company that wanted their frontline brand ambassadors to be able to be versed at how to tell a story to better connect with the right clients for their product. So it turns out that, at least this is what I do, is I look at the brand's why, right? Simon Sinek, start with why. It's the core meaning of everything that they do. So if you're going to tell stories about a brand, I always think the best place to tell that story is you're telling stories about their why. We're a family company. We've been in business for 50 years. We believe in this and we believe in that. There's your story. And out of that, you extract everything that you need to build a physical location, to help them sell their product online, build a training manual for their frontline staff. All of those are still stories. It's just because it's not, I'm Emma Watts and I was born in 1867 and I came on the, Oregon Trail to blah. That's a story too. Works for theme parks, not going to work for retail, not going to work for leisure, wellness. None of that's going to work. So my recommendation is to go back to the core meaning of the brand and extrapolate stories from that.
I agree 100% core meaning of the brand. And I think I'm going to build on your takeaways. What does the client want the story to accomplish? It's not just about pretty words. It's not just about creating that beautiful narrative. We can be as artsy as we want to up here, but quite often when you're dealing with a client that's not IP based, and that is, say, for example, a merchandise vendor or a culinary vendor, what is it that they want to do? Do they want brand awareness? Do they want to sell as much product as they possibly can? Do they want to expand their brand to other markets? And then create a story based on all the information that you have about how that company was founded, what they hold dear to their hearts, and make sure it hits the takeaway.
Well, that's an IP.
It's creating an IP. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because again, I work with minimal numbers of IPs. Most of the stuff that I get to work with comes from here and the client. It's going back to Howl-O-Scream versus Halloween Horror Nights. Howl-O-Scream we couldn't afford. I mean, I'll be completely transparent. I don't work for them anymore, so my NDA doesn't count. No, but in fairness, I've been given, yes, it does, but I've been given permission to talk about this in these kinds of situations. We did not have the budget of a Halloween Horror Nights. Our budget to put on the entire event was what Horror Nights, and this was 11, 12, 13 years ago. Our entire budget for the event was what Horror Nights paid just to get the IPs. So we would have had the rights to do all those cool things and no money to actually install them. So we had to come up with our own versions of things based on what we wanted guests to feel. And, we went into that variety of, it's Halloween, so you can't scare people the same way twice. So we wanted to create a huge amount of variety. We told great stories. And I will never forget one night when my buddy Kim Grommel came over and he was up to his eyeballs in Halloween Horror Nights. And he came over to our event and he looked at me and went, "Damn, you don't have anybody who's going to tell you no, do you?" And at the same time, he was right. I mean, my boss would, but we didn't have John Landis coming in going, "You know what? I don't like this anymore." So we had a great deal of freedom, but with that freedom comes lack of structure. So sometimes what you have to do is take all of that information about the client, add the takeaway, and then what you said earlier, you kind of like to be backed into a corner. You have to build yourself a jungle gym in order to play on it. So you may have to create your own structure when you don't have the structure of an IP.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Well, okay, I'm gonna stand up. Hi, my name is Annalise. I'm new to town. I actually just moved in on August 4th and just started working for Disney like today. So
Welcome.
Thank you. I love Mickey. So my question is, this can be applied to anybody because it has to do with how do you engage an audience before the show even starts? So like this could be applied to like an attraction or like an actual like stage performance. Like, so basically anything themed entertainment, like why we're all here, I guess, you know, but like, how do you engage an audience and make them excited for what they're about to see, like as they're waiting for it? Like how do you do that?
Before it opens, you mean? Or
Well, like so like a queue or, you know, like the pre-show or something like that. Because I've spent a lot of times in lines, you know, and I'm talking about Disney World because I haven't been to Universal in a while. But I stand in those lines a lot, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. Like, how did they do this? You know? So yeah, okay, I'm a yapper. This is really exciting. But yeah, I'm gonna sit down now so I can listen. Thank you guys.
I think that it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about the story is integral to what we do, but the gift to the audience is their experience. So the first experience they should have is an invitation of some kind, and that's what you get in the name of the piece, in what the little picture, the logo, and the map looks like in the queue. How are you inviting them into the story? Because again, it's generally not a proscenium thing that you're going to watch. You're inviting them to step into the story, and that begins early in Blue Sky Phase. How are we inviting them? How are we inviting them to engage? When does their journey begin? And you have the whole toe dipper, swimmer, deep diver. You know, if somebody's totally into the IP, they're going to find every little doodad, and if they're not, it should be at least pleasant for them. No, I don't know. Anyone else? No.
I think from a visual standpoint, because I think often in visual terms, the cue is often your establishing shot. I mean, sometimes the view of the land is that as well, but if you just have them jump from a Mario ride to a How to Train Your Dragon ride, that's such a twist. So you have the land is themed, and by the time they get onto whatever the ride is, they're immersed in that mindset of that story. And so you're already telling some of the story of that ride often before they even get into the queue. And then when they're in the queue, that's your world building opportunity. That's when they start to feel like, okay, I'm in this world. So by the time the narrative of the ride or attraction is presented to them, they're already mentally in the right place. And I think that's something that, you know, Disney and Universal do really well. Other parks to varying degrees, but because that story starts the moment you get in there and starts preparing you mentally, I think.
Yeah, it's where the narrative starts. Yeah.
You know, and to categorize that, as you were asking the question, I literally was like, what cues do I remember? Like, which ones are the most memorable ones to me, good or bad? Is it horrible and I'm just miserable in the queue? There's amazing attractions that I love that have linear footage of nothingness, of painted walls with a wainscot and a paper wallpaper. And it's like you could have just put a screen at the end of that and tell me something along the way. I don't care if it's the security video of keeping my hands inside of the ride, something more than looking at my phone or the kids that are yelling in the TikTok. And it's just like, give me something to engage me as I'm going to the story. And then I think about the ones that you do it very well. It's no longer there, but Shrek. It was a kid's ride, but Shrek had that little pre-show and it was hilarious. And, you know, in the 2000s, that was like prime movie time. You had just watched the movie. So there it is. And the Pinocchio jokes and the Prince were great. Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure just really brings you in. Unfortunately, they're not putting on the live show. I think it's a ripoff. Put the live show back in, because not the show, but just the show with the Pepper's Ghost effect would tell you why Hagrid is trying to make these bikes work and how it goes array and then becomes these magical motorcycle bikes that are now not being controlled by anyone because they're magical. So that was very immersive, and it was literally getting you to buy off into the story that you're about to experience. Why is this havoc about to happen? It's because of all these things that I saw. And they you know, it was dual too, because it was a great attraction as Hagrid's, and before Hagrid's, it was a great attraction as Dueling Dragons, where it's the same queue building. And during that queue, you had a journey to select fire or ice, which one of the coasters you were going to get on. And that whole process of it, you were looking at the eggs and the dragons, and you got more and more scared of like what's about to happen and choose thy fate, you know? So I think including story into it. And then you have the ones that had no story, but you're just like, okay, we know people are bored, so let's entertain them. I don't know if you remember Soaring in the 2000s, 2003. Soaring had the first kinetic game. You used to play, you know, had nothing to do with the story of Soaring, but it really made that 30 minutes feel, or 45 minutes feel shorter. So entertainment or story, That's how I would engage. the-
I would even challenge to start the story before the cue. I'm a firm believer that the story begins for a guest. You know, we were talking about your story choice and what you choose to tell has to be guest centric. I actually try, I don't always succeed, but I always try with my clients to include things that can happen before they even get to the park that will help them understand what's going to happen when they get there. I think that, a mentor and very dear friend of mine once said the guest experience begins the first time they hear about it and ends with the last social media post. So, and I think that's going to become more and more impactful as we're moving forward. Now, we're there. We're already there. We're already there. So anything you can do, yes, it has to be there for the queue. Agreed. Has to be there for the queue. But it also needs to be there in the billboards. And it also needs to be there in any of the marketing that goes on. This is why I say writers have to really make friends with a lot of different people. At Busch Gardens, I spent more time in our marketing department than I did in my own office because I was curious as to how they were going to market some of the events that I was working on. And it got to the point where when we came to selecting like icons for certain events, we would have the discussion, how are we going to implement that in the park? So it wasn't, sorry, I'm going to go back. I'm going to show my age. It wasn't, we have a storyteller and we have a motorcycle gang. Because the storyteller was on TV, the motorcycle gang was in the park. Some of you know what I'm talking about. They were both great, but they were completely disconnected. So I think we owe it to our guests to make sure that the story arc is consistent from the first time they hear about it through the last time they mention it.
All right. Now we have one mic. Okay, we have an online question.
Hi, gang. While I have the mic, before we get to the online question, I want to say that we've gotten a lot of questions online in the audience and prior to this event about how to craft story. And based on what I'm seeing and hearing here, I would love to put together a creative writing workshop in the future. So yeah, maybe I can appeal to some of you guys to participate in that. So let me just say that out loud, and so keep your eyes peeled. We'll start noodling on that. So like I said, we have a lot of questions online. One of them is from Sarah Joy Hall, who some of you know from Universal Studios. And she asked a wonderful question, if I can find it. There it is. It is, this really is for Frank and Tim. How can project team members in other disciplines advocate for writers throughout the process? I'd love to hear your answer on that.
Well, hello, Sarah online and Dave. I hope you guys are watching together. How to advocate for writers throughout the process. I think that subliminally you say, oh, where's the story? In the first 5 meetings, you're like, okay, you're telling me where to put the show set. You're telling me where to put the castle. Can I get the narrative, please? Because I'm a little lost here, but it's a huge dichotomy of experience, especially from a design standpoint when there is a story. And a lot of teams are rushing. They're just getting in and you just have work to do. They're hiring you when a deliverable is past due. So you're just getting information, IP data, sheets, mood boards, just go and do this versus coming into a meeting for like a Gary Blumenstein who took a vendor that was brand new, set him down. And I'm like, what is your hourly rate, dude, that you're going to sit me down? You were there on Hagrid's and literally just said, listen, before you guys draw anything, here's a PowerPoint. And we went slide by slide to get buy-off and understanding of why we're turning the corner. Why is Fluffy there? And all those things along the way just makes a huge difference. Has buy-off for all the designers. It's a little bit of a lost craft because of the velocity in which projects need to get built, but there's still a number of heroes out there holding on to that at Disney, Universal, and even overseas, but mainly Disney, Universal, that will sit you down and say, this is the purpose. You're going to help us get there. You may be the wheels, you may be the transmission, you may be the fuel, but at the end of the day, here is our roadmap or MapQuest, to date myself, to where the destination is. And once you've transmitted that information, all of us get to be advocates to get to the goal without veering away or having arguments because the story is our GPS. So that's how we advocate for writers.
Yeah, in a lot of my experience, I've been at the very beginning of a concept. So sometimes I'll be the first person on there, or second person, just to help develop the idea. So my way of going about that is just doing a really bad job doing the writing until they have to find someone to fix it. Now, there's some truth to that, but basically because I've had the opportunity to help develop story at the beginning when we're in that kind of situation when they don't have a team put together for it yet. And I try to make it clear that either, yes, I can help craft the story and do 2 pieces of key art, or have somebody else craft the story and I give you 6 pieces of key art, because those are 2 different jobs. And I'm willing to do one or the other because I enjoy both of them. I'm better at the art side. That's just the side of my brain I've developed more. And so if you want the most bang for your buck, get somebody else to do the other part and we'll tag team this development, because otherwise it's just, it's going to be half-assed on both sides. So try to, fill one of those roles.
When I told him my proposal would be in his inbox at the end of the night earlier tonight, I said that I wasn't joking. I know the pain of delivering a project with clients that understand writing is going to be a lot less. It's like the effort of understanding the mission there will not require a change order from us. Will not consume our time doing the circle that I was joking about earlier, or the million of concepts, because you're just throwing ingredients together that don't go together. When there's a story at the beginning, actually on this panel is one of my mentors, Theron Skis. And there was a lovely project in the Caribbean that he brought me onto. And when you get a project brought to you by a writer, they're the best, because you are in line with a team that understands a goal and understands the proper process. There is a method to success, or knowing when a story is good or when a writer is good. I believe that just like the hero's journey, there is a formula. Not saying that everybody that does the formula has a great story, but there's not a great story without the formula. It has to have those beats. When Theron brought me onto this project, I'll tell a little anecdote here and we'll go to the next question. This gentleman out of Mexico, we have dinner with him, and literally he was so bought into the brand and what it needed to be that he literally over dinner says, no, Francisco, you need to come to Mexico so that you can understand our hotel. And it was like such a wonderful experience that they flew me and my family down, and Theron and his wife were there, just so that we can be guests before we design. That was wonderful.
Are there any other questions from any of you? Yeah.
Hi, so my name's Cameron. I'm an aspiring writer, but it's cool being in here and listening to all of you guys who have these distinguished careers and incredible backgrounds. So my question to you is there any one specific thing when you reflect on everything you've learned from where you are now backwards to where you were standing where I am at now, that you wish you would have knew then?
You'll get there. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
This may come from left field, perhaps, but one of the things that I would go back and tell my early self is to make sure and keep things balanced. That's the difficulty when you really love your job. I don't know if any of you remember when you were young enough to come to the realization that, okay, nobody in my family is independently wealthy, so I'm going to have to work for the largest portion of my life and to live. And it would really be great to love what I do. And then when you arrive at that place where you love what you do, you then encounter the other problem, which is you love what you do, and that sometimes you have a tendency to sacrifice everything else because you love what you do. And that's what I would go back and tell my early self in the 80s when I got started, was make sure that you keep a good balance with your inner circle, your family, your spouse, your significant other, whoever those people are, because you get a lot of inspiration from them, you get a lot of balance from them. And mostly our world is creative. that works for pretty much every discipline but finance. You know, I've met some pretty creative finance people, but most everybody is creative in some way, a solutioneer. And when you're in a place where you've got to have ideas on demand that are, you know, drop a quarter in your ear and you need a new idea, that can occupy your whole life. And if you end up turning away the people that are the most important to you when you really need them, and they're not there, it really shows up. So that's what I would say. It's maybe a little bit different than what you might have expected, but that balance is really critical. And there'll be times when you're sleeping under your desk for like the 7th night in a row on an install, seriously, and you smell like something in the dumpster because you haven't bathed. And that's just, you know, welcome to it, folks. That's what happens. And your significant other's like, are you at least eating? You know, that's what's really important for them to show up in your life and to give you that strength. So that'd be my encouragement.
I'm going to build right off of that. Yes, keep it balanced, because in order to be a writer, in order to be a creative, you have to have inspiration. And that inspiration can come from your family. They can come from those dear to you. I always use the phrase, you know, if a cluttered desk is the sign of a cluttered mind, what is an empty desk a sign of? I surround myself with, I'm constantly finding new things. I'm constantly trying to find new experiences because that just gives me more fodder. The other thing I would recommend is if you want to be a writer, write. Don't wait for someone to ask you. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Write. Now, I'm not saying write for free and give it away to everybody. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is I have 5 books of poetry and prose that I think maybe 10 people have read. And I don't care. Because I wrote them, I self-published because I wanted to write. And I honed my skills. And, you know, and I continue to hone my skills because I write for me sometimes, and that's okay. Because if you don't have the client that's paying you, now if you got the client that's paying you, yes, transfer that passion, transfer that excitement into them, because that pays your mortgage and your rent and, you know, all that stuff. But don't wait for someone to give you permission to write. If you want to write, write.
I would say follow the yes. That's one of the things I've lived by. I am an accidental theme park writer. It was not my intention, but that's who said yes. That's who showed up and said, "Hey, yeah." And so I think when you're new, and one of the things I did was I just wrote anyone who would pay me anything to write. And I think now there are so many more writers in the industry. I encourage new writers to if you have a social cause or a charity that you care about, go to them and figure out, are they doing a gala? What are they doing that you can support them with writing? Then you keep your hours, you give them an invoice, you cross off the total bill. You've learned how to give your hours. They know what you're worth. And next year when they want the gala to go as well as last year's because they made more money, maybe they'll find the money to pay you, or maybe they'll find the money to give you a stipend. But I think following the yes, whatever door opens, walk through it and, you know, keep going.
I also think you should keep in mind that it's not just narratives and scripts that writers write. There are a lot of other materials that need to be written. And I was just going to ask you guys this question, which is, what's something that a guest might not know was written, but actually is very important for them to feel what they need to feel? A menu?
Signage.
Actually, Emily Oliver, Em Oliver has a fantastic series of posts on LinkedIn about all the tiny little things that happen in a queue, you know, like writing the notes on the desk. You know, somebody might just say, we need notes on the desk. Somebody throw something down, but if they actually mean something. But I think there's like 2 or 3 posts that are really good. You should check them out.
And it can be something like writing the names for vehicles. Like there are some attractions that actually have cute little names for all the vehicles, and the writer does that too. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, I think we only have time to take one more question.
When you're talking about the accidentally becoming a writer, so that kind of happened to me. The first part's more of a comment, not so much a question, but I'm a firm believer in the last few years that there's more writers than there are writing gigs. Now, if someone has the experience split up into different disciplines, with writing being one of them, but every time you try to pursue something else, you get pigeonholed and typecasted as a writer. How do you deal with that? Have you ever had to deal with that? How do you get out of that?
I wasn't an accidental writer. I was just an accidental theme park writer.
That's what my company's all about. When I left Busch Gardens, I left because my job no longer existed. I was part of one of the SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment cullings, as we will call them, that have happened 6 or 7 times throughout the course of the park. I walked in one morning and my position no longer existed. I was told, here's your exit package, give me your keys, give me your ID, and that was it. So I took my skill set as director of entertainment and I decided, what do I want to do? My company is not called Scott Swenson Production because I don't want to be a producer every day. It's creative development, which falls, and I did that so intentionally because I love to work on a bunch of different projects simultaneously. My brain works better if I happen to be scattered. So I to this day, I have projects that are writing, I have projects that are directing, I have projects that are producing still, even though I don't like to do it. And the way I've found is, I think we said it earlier, if you're a writer or a director, if you're a director, you're also a writer. You have to have that skill set. If you feel as though you're getting pigeonholed, break the mold. I know that sounds really simplistic and almost smug. I don't mean it to. But if you have the opportunity to head off in a different direction and that's where you want to try, that's where your passion lies, try it. Push it. Use your connections as a writer to say, hey, you know what? I'll write it and then I'll direct it for you. I do that all the time. And then I get 2 paychecks, which is pretty cool. One of the things for me is I just discovered I love to paint. So now I'm painting and I'm in multiple gallery shows and having a great time doing it. It goes back to if you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be a director, direct. If you want to do all of it without giving up your family, without giving up those people that are important to you, we don't have to be pigeonholed. We will be pigeonholed if we allow ourselves to be. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it at the end. I turned my ADHD into a business model. I'm doing a bunch of things all the time, and I've never been happier.
Thank you so much for sharing your vision, your insights, your passion, and your stories with all of us. It's really been wonderful. And to any decision makers out there or in here, as you head off on your next creative adventure, I hope you will save room at the table and also on your team for a writer. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, of course. I wanted you to get your chance.
Thank you.